Sin is a choice against God's will. I think those two pieces are so important, the choice aspect of it, and then against God's will. So if people say, I accidentally did this, well, okay. But sin is actually a choice to do something that's not in accord with God's will. So it puts us sort of outside of what He desires for us and for the world.
So sin is the Hebrew word it's an archery term for missing the mark. We have all these desires. So archery, if you're looking at the bullseye and you're pulling back the arrow, and we have all these desires, and that's all the passion and our desires in our hearts, and then we let it go, and missing the mark, if we are aiming the wrong way, that is sin.
I don't have to give up pursuing these desires. I just have to adjust my aim. I just have to adjust my path. And that for me was just such a redemptive moment. And when I realized that I didn't have to do it alone, I had God's grace. Like, wow, now it's the power. Now it's not me pulling myself up on my bootstraps.
Being in a relationship, I mean, if it's not with God, then with anyone. Doing, saying, thinking, like something that that would be contrary to like what that relationship is, and could cause some sort of disconnect with that person, and in this case, God.
Know that the decisions that you make right now in your life, they matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm 33 years old, and there's decisions I made when I was in high school that are still affecting my life.
Mm-hmm.
And had I known that they were going to affect my life like this, I just wouldn't have done it.
I think a lot of people question sin these days, myself included, you know, sometimes just by trying to justify our behaviors to do what we think is best for our emotions and what is the appropriate response in dealing with other relationships. But I know that sin is real because I think it's evidence in the hardness of our hearts. When we are not acting out of love, when we are intentionally choosing to use our freedom of free will, not for the good of another or not for the good of ourselves. And we justify it by saying, well, this feels right. You know, this is what my body wants. This is what I think I want mentally, even though it may not be an act of love. And when we do that, our hearts become desensitized. Our minds become desensitized. And I think we can see that all around us.
I think it was Father Benedict Grichel, the CFR, you know Father Benedict Grichel is, right? He said, you know, people ask me if sin exists. I say, take a walk down the streets in New York City, any day, any time, and then you'll know that sin exists. We see it in ourselves. We see it in what people do. There's just something fundamentally broken about the human being that gets manifested in choices that hurt ourselves or hurt others and cause, you know, evil consequences. Sin affects us in a number of ways. If you look in the scriptures, you'll find that sin causes like a fourfold alienation between, and you can go back and find this in the story of Adam and Eve. It causes alienation between us and God, between us and one another, between us and ourselves, and between us and all creation. So it damages our relationship with God. It damages our relationship with other people. You know, if I gossip about somebody behind their back, it hurts our relationship. Between us and ourselves, you know, it causes confusion. We know not about we're not supposed to do something. If we keep doing it, we confuse ourselves about what the good really is. So that's a consequence. And then between us and creation, think about just all the pollution in the ways that we just wreck our environment. So it creates alienation between something that is ultimately for our good. We destroy.
So from my own personal experience, the way sin affects me, I tend to get more isolated, more disconnected from people. and I tend to feel like a mess. I will start to get a lot more self-conscious. Like people are watching me and like they're seeing what I'm doing, and I'll be wondering like, oh, did this person think badly of me for this reason, and like that kind of stuff. And again, like when I think back and I'm like, all right, like regroup, Teresa, what happened recently? And I realize like I haven't like thought about the things that I did that may have disconnected me from my relationship with God, which for me ends up disconnecting me from the people around me.
When there's so much hurt going on in our world, and not even in the expansive world, look right in front of you, look in your school. And I know at least when I was in school that was the case too. We see people who we may not get along with, or we may not understand, someone who's different from us, and maybe they're sitting by themselves, and we see they're going through a difficult time, and rather than trying to seek understanding, if they approach us and we get into a disagreement, rather than being able to be patient and charitable with them, we want to puff up our chests, we want to defend ourselves, and we get really defensive, and we are unable to see a human being sitting in front of us, because we've become desensitized to being compassionate, to being charitable. And sin prevents us from choosing to love.